They called him worthless. For 15 years, Marcus endured the whispers, the dismissive glances, the way people's eyes would slide past him as if he didn't exist. He worked at Riverside Corporate as a maintenance supervisor, the invisible man who cleaned the halls while executives discussed billion-dollar deals in conference rooms he'd swept that morning. Nobody knew his name. Nobody cared. But that was exactly how Marcus wanted it. What they didn't know was that 7 years ago, he'd made a single investment, a tiny tech startup founded by a brilliant young engineer nobody believed in. Everyone told Marcus he was throwing away money, that he'd never see a return. But Marcus had learned something most people never understand. Character reveals itself when nobody's watching. He'd invested not just capital, but time. He'd mentored the founder. He believed when the world doubted. That startup became a phenomenon, and Marcus became a billionaire. But Marcus wasn't interested in yachts or penthouse suites. He was interested in truth. He wanted to know who the real people in his life were, who would betray him for profit, who would stay loyal when they thought he had nothing. So he devised something calculated, something deliberate. He created tests, small scenarios designed to reveal the hearts of those around him. His first target was Richard Castellano, the CEO of Riverside Corporate. Richard had spent 15 years watching Marcus work, and for 15 years, he treated him like furniture. But 2 weeks ago, Richard had discovered Marcus's true identity through a slip-up in a financial database. Instead of feeling ashamed, Richard saw opportunity. He scheduled a private meeting with Marcus, his voice dripping with sudden respect, his handshake firm and calculated. "Marcus," Richard had said, leaning back in his leather chair, "I've always recognized potential in people. I'd like to discuss a partnership, something that could benefit us both tremendously." The irony was suffocating. 15 years of indifference, and now Richard wanted partnership. Marcus smiled and agreed to the terms. But he was watching, observing, testing. That same week, there was Jennifer. She'd been Marcus's supervisor's daughter, a woman he'd known since she was 12 years old. Jennifer had grown into a bright, ambitious woman, but she'd also grown into someone who measured people by their net worth. When she discovered Marcus's wealth through an overheard conversation at a company event, her entire demeanor shifted. She accidentally ran into him at a coffee shop the next morning, suddenly interested in his life story, his thoughts on business, his vision for the future. But Marcus remembered Jennifer from before. He remembered when she'd rolled her eyes at him in the hallway. He remembered her dismissive tone when she'd asked him to fix the copier in her father's office. He remembered the way she'd laugh with her friends about poor maintenance guys who'd never amount to anything. Now she wanted his attention. Now she wanted his time. And Marcus was collecting data on every interaction, every false smile, every calculated word. Then there was David. David worked in the same department as Marcus, in the mailroom, sorting packages and delivering correspondence. David had always treated Marcus with genuine kindness. They'd grab coffee together sometimes, talk about life, about dreams, about the weight of invisibility. David had never known Marcus was wealthy, and Marcus had never told him. Their friendship had been built on something simpler, something more real. When David found out the truth, accidentally, through a conversation he overheard, his first reaction wasn't what Marcus expected. David didn't immediately try to leverage the relationship for personal gain. Instead, David felt embarrassed. He apologized, thinking perhaps he'd been annoying to someone so important. His shame was genuine, his concern authentic. But Marcus needed to test him too. He needed to be absolutely certain. The revelation was coming. The moment when everyone would discover that the invisible man they'd walked past for years, the maintenance supervisor they'd ignored in hallways and conference rooms, was actually their equal. More than their equal. He was their superior. And he'd been watching them all along. If you're drawn to stories about hidden power, about the moment when truth shatters comfortable lies, make sure you're subscribed. Because what happens next will shake everyone involved to their core. Marcus's journey to invisibility hadn't started with choice. It started with loss. 22 years ago, when he was still young and hungry and believed the world rewarded hard work, Marcus had been a rising executive at a major investment firm. He was ambitious, talented, destined for the corner office. Then came the night that changed everything. His sister, Claire, had been in a car accident, a drunk driver, a split-second collision. A life ended in an instant. Marcus had been with her at the hospital when she died, and in that moment, something fundamental shifted inside him. The ambition, the drive for status, the hunger for recognition, it all fell hollow, meaningless. What was the point of climbing a ladder if the people you loved could be taken away randomly, senselessly? He quit his job that year, spent time in therapy, in reflection, in grief. When he finally reemerged, he was different. He decided to live deliberately, to invest in people rather than portfolios, to notice the invisible people that society overlooked, the maintenance workers, the custodians, the entry-level employees. He wanted to understand humanity from the margins. That's when he'd met that young engineer, David Chun, at a community center where Marcus volunteered teaching financial literacy to underprivileged kids. David was brilliant, but broke. His technology was revolutionary, but he couldn't find investors who believed in his vision. Everyone saw risk. Marcus saw potential. More importantly, Marcus saw character. David was humble, hungry, and genuinely kind to people regardless of their status. When Marcus had offered the investment, David had been shocked. "Why would you believe in me?" David had asked. "You don't know me." "I know enough," Marcus had replied. "I know you treat the janitor at the community center with the same respect you treat a billionaire. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." 7 years later, that investment had multiplied into billions. But Marcus had remained invisible. He quietly accumulated wealth while continuing his work at Riverside, continuing to live modestly in a small apartment, continuing to be the man people looked through rather than at. Now the tests were accelerating. Test 1. Richard Castellano's proposition. They met in Richard's office, all mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Richard presented a partnership opportunity that was actually a thinly veiled scheme to have Marcus invest capital into a venture that Richard controlled. Richard would benefit from Marcus's wealth and connections while maintaining control and taking the lion's share of profits. Marcus listened carefully, asked strategic questions, and watched Richard's face as the CEO talked about mutual benefit and shared vision. What Marcus saw was greed. Not ambition, greed. Richard's eyes lit up when discussing money, but his expression went flat when Marcus asked about the company's impact on employees, about fair wages, about environmental responsibility. Richard didn't care about building something meaningful. He cared about extracting value. Test 2. Jennifer's persistence. She'd engineered a chance meeting at a networking event where Marcus was speaking as a guest panelist. Her approach was calculated perfection. She'd researched his interests, learned his preferences, positioned herself as someone who shared his vision. Over 3 coffee meetings, she'd gradually revealed her plan. She wanted Marcus to fund her startup, a luxury lifestyle brand targeting elite clientele. When Marcus asked what inspired her passion for the business, her answer was telling. Honestly, Jennifer had said, smiling that practiced smile, "The money, the margin potential is insane. We can make serious returns." She hadn't mentioned impact. She hadn't mentioned creating value for customers or building a team she believed in. It was pure financial calculation dressed up in business language. Marcus had listened to her pitch, promised to consider it, and continued his observation. Test 3. David. This was the hardest test because Marcus genuinely cared about David's reaction. He'd orchestrated a scenario where David would overhear a phone conversation, Marcus discussing his investment portfolio with his financial advisor. David had listened from the adjacent break room, understanding for the first time that his friend was extraordinarily wealthy. The next day, David had been different, quieter. When they grabbed lunch together, David had been almost formal, addressing Marcus as Mr. Anderson instead of just Marcus. There was shame in David's expression, a sense that the friendship had been somehow compromised by the revelation. "Look," David had finally said, "I need to tell you something. I feel weird about this. I feel like I've been taking advantage of your time, not knowing you were someone so important." Marcus had felt his chest tighten. This was the moment of truth. "David, Marcus had said slowly. "You think less of me now that you know I have money?" "What? No, that's not. Because I think more of you. Not because of your net worth. Because of your character. That hasn't changed." David's expression had softened, but the test wasn't over. Not yet. Test 4 was unexpected. It involved Marcus's longtime neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived in the apartment next to his. She'd been struggling to pay rent, and Marcus had anonymously helped her through a community assistance program. When she discovered it was Marcus who'd done it, her gratitude had been overwhelming. But Marcus had watched carefully for any shift in their dynamic, any expectation of ongoing support, any change in how she treated him. What he discovered was something purer. Mrs. Patterson had tried to repay him with homemade meals, with genuine thanks, and when he'd refused her money, she'd simply accepted it. She treated him no differently, expected nothing from him, and her gratitude seemed to be about genuine human connection rather than financial transaction. Test 5 was in motion now. It involved Marcus's ex-wife, Sarah. They'd been married for 8 years before divorcing amicably 5 years ago. Sarah had moved on, remarried, built a new life. But recently, she discovered Marcus's wealth through social media, and she'd reached out with a carefully worded message. "I miss your friendship. Would love to catch up over dinner." Marcus knew the truth. Sarah's new husband was struggling financially. She needed something. The question was, would she ask outright, or would she try to manipulate Marcus into offering help? Would she appeal to their shared history, or would she manufacture reasons for Marcus to feel obligated? The tests were collecting a portrait of humanity in its rawest form. Greed, ambition, shame, gratitude, manipulation, and genuine connection. Each test was revealing who people truly were beneath their social masks. But there was one final test, the one Marcus had been preparing for weeks. It would bring everyone together, Richard, Jennifer, David, Sarah, Mrs. Patterson, and a few others, into a single room where the truth would be impossible to hide, where pretense would shatter, and where character would be the only currency that mattered. The invitations had already been sent, disguised as a corporate event. Everyone would arrive thinking they were attending a charity gala benefiting education initiatives. What they didn't know was that this gathering would be the moment when every test reached its conclusion, when every lie would be exposed, and when Marcus would finally stop being invisible. The ballroom at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel was beautiful in an impersonal way. Crystal chandeliers, white linens, orchestral music filling the spaces between conversation. Everyone Marcus had invited had arrived, dressed in their finest, performing their best selves. They had no idea this wasn't a charity gala. This was a reckoning. Marcus stood backstage, watching through a carefully positioned monitor as his guests mingled. Richard was working the room like a predator, networking, positioning himself near the most powerful-looking people he could identify. Jennifer was doing the same, her laugh practiced and bright, her attention calibrated to whoever might benefit her most. Sarah was near the bar, looking slightly uncomfortable in the formal setting. David sat alone at a table, genuinely enjoying the catered food, unaware of what was about to happen. At exactly 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the center of the ballroom. Marcus stepped into it. For a moment, there was confusion. These people recognized him, but not in this context, not in a spotlight, not in formal wear, not commanding attention. The cognitive dissonance registered on their faces, shock, confusion, the subtle recalibration of their minds trying to process why the maintenance man was standing center stage at a high society event. Marcus picked up the microphone. His voice was calm, measured, carrying the weight of years of observation. "Good evening. Thank you for coming. I know many of you are wondering why you're here. Some of you think this is a charity event. Some of you think this is a networking opportunity. Some of you think this is a coincidence. None of those things are true." Richard's expression shifted to calculation. Jennifer's smile faltered. David looked genuinely concerned. "My name is Marcus Anderson. For 15 years, I've worked at Riverside Corporate in maintenance. For 15 years, I've been invisible. I've watched how you treat people you consider beneath you. I've observed how your character emerges when you think nobody important is watching." The camera panned across their faces. Richard's jaw tightened. Jennifer's hand trembled slightly as she set down her champagne glass. I want to tell you about my life before Riverside. I was an executive once. I was ambitious, driven, consumed by status and wealth. Then my sister died, and everything changed. I realized that climbing a ladder meant nothing if the people you loved could be taken away randomly. So I chose invisibility. I chose to invest in people instead of portfolios. I chose to understand humanity from the margins. Marcus paused. He could see the moment comprehension began to dawn on some of their faces. 7 years ago, I invested in a company. Today, that investment is worth $2.3 billion. I am a billionaire, and I've spent the last 18 months testing each of you. The words landed like stones into still water. Richard. Marcus turned to face the CEO directly. You've been offered a partnership opportunity, haven't you? You've calculated how much you can extract from my wealth while maintaining control over the narrative. You've planned how to leverage my capital for your benefit while taking the majority of profits. You treat people as resources to be exploited. 15 years of ignoring someone's humanity has shown me exactly who you are. Richard stood up, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. This is insane. You're a maintenance worker playing dress-up. I'm a billionaire who chose to know you before deciding whether you deserve my investment. My answer is no. Additionally, I've discovered significant accounting irregularities in the Riverside Investment Fund that you oversee. I've already contacted the SEC. The room went silent. Richard's face went white. He turned and walked toward the exit, his evening ruined, his career potentially ending. Jennifer, Marcus's gaze moved to her. You're brilliant. You're ambitious. You have real potential. But you've built your entire sense of self-worth on status and money. You look at people and calculate their value based on their net worth. When you discovered I had wealth, you suddenly wanted to know me. That tells me your friendship would have been conditional. I'm declining your partnership proposal, but I'm offering you something else, a mentorship. No money, just guidance on building genuine value rather than chasing status. Jennifer looked confused, then insulted, then something shifted in her expression. There was a flicker of recognition, of shame, of something real breaking through her carefully constructed persona. Sarah, Marcus turned to his ex-wife. I know your husband is struggling financially. I know you reached out to me because you hoped I'd offer help, but you couldn't ask directly. You had to manufacture the appearance of friendship, of shared history, to justify soliciting my support. I want you to know that I will help you, not because of the past we shared, but because you're struggling and I can help. I'm transferring $500,000 to you, not as a loan, as a gift, because that's who I am now. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. But Marcus could see something else too, gratification mixed with shame. He'd given her what she needed, but he'd also made her aware of her own manipulations. The gift came with the weight of self-knowledge. David, Marcus's voice softened. When he said his friend's name, the entire room seemed to lean in. You're the only person here who treated me the same before and after you discovered my wealth. When you found out, you felt embarrassed. You thought somehow the dynamic had changed. But here's what I want you to understand. Your character didn't change based on my net worth. You're still the same kind person you were when we were grabbing coffee and talking about life. I'm offering you something formal now. I want you to lead the global expansion of your company. Full autonomy, significant equity stake, and a mandate to build something meaningful. But that offer isn't because you're my friend. It's because you're exactly who we need. David stood up slowly, processing, and Marcus could see tears forming in his eyes. And Mrs. Patterson, thank you for being here. An elderly woman near the back raised her hand. You're the only person in this room who showed genuine humanity, without any expectation of return. You tried to repay kindness with kindness. That's the person I want to build a foundation with. I'm making you the director of a $500 million charitable initiative focused on affordable housing, effective immediately. Mrs. Patterson's hand went to her mouth, shock and joy mixing in her expression. Each of you came here thinking you understood who I was. Invisible maintenance supervisor. Easy to overlook, easy to use. But invisibility was a choice. It was a way for me to see clearly, without the distortion of status and wealth. And what I've learned is that character is the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that endures. Marcus stepped back from a microphone. The room was in chaos. Some people standing, some leaving, some completely stunned. Richard had already fled. Jennifer sat at her table, her face in her hands. David was openly crying. Sarah stood alone, processing complexity of receiving generosity intertwined with recognition of her own manipulation. But there was one more moment, the one Marcus had been saving. A man stepped out from backstage. It was David Chun, the engineer, the founder of the company that had made Marcus wealthy. He'd been watching the entire time. He walked directly to Marcus and embraced him. "Thank you," David Chun said into the microphone. "This man took a chance on me when nobody else would. He believed in my vision and in my character. But more than that, he taught me that wealth is meaningless without purpose. I'm announcing tonight that 50% of my company's profits will be directed toward education initiatives in underprivileged communities. My partner, Marcus Anderson, will oversee this initiative. Together, we're going to change how society values the invisible people." The room erupted, but beneath the noise, there were different reactions. Richard's seat was empty. Jennifer was staring at the floor, genuinely confronting herself. David was shaking with emotion. Sarah was crying, understanding the full weight of what had just happened. And Mrs. Patterson was smiling, knowing she'd been right about Marcus all along. Invisibility had been a choice. But now, Marcus was choosing to be seen, not for his wealth, but for his values. And everyone in the room was being forced to confront their own. In the weeks following the gala, the reverberations spread like ripples through still water. Richard Castellano's accounting irregularities became public. He faced federal charges and resigned in disgrace. But here's what matters. One morning, Marcus received a letter. Richard, sitting in his attorney's office, had written a genuine apology, not for getting caught, for who he'd been, for how he'd treated people as less than. The letter was brief, but authentic. Marcus wrote back, "Thank you for your honesty. I'm considering speaking to prosecutors about leniency if you genuinely commit to rehabilitation. Character can change if we're willing to examine ourselves honestly." It was forgiveness with accountability. Jennifer's story was different. She'd spent 2 months in Marcus's mentorship program, and slowly, something shifted in her. She dismantled her luxury brand idea and instead founded a business incubator for first-generation entrepreneurs. No venture capital from Marcus, just his time, his perspective, his belief that she could build something meaningful. Her last message to him read, "I realized I was measuring my worth through other people's perception of my wealth. Now I'm measuring it through impact. It's terrifying and beautiful. Character, it turns out, can be cultivated." Sarah received the $500,000, and her family's financial crisis resolved. But the real transformation was internal. She started therapy, began examining why she defaulted to manipulation rather than direct communication. She sent Marcus a message. "I want to rebuild our friendship on honest ground, not past history, just genuine connection." Marcus agreed. They became real friends, not because of money, but despite it. David's trajectory was meteoric. As a new leader of global expansion, he tripled the company's market share while maintaining its core values. But more importantly, he never forgot the lesson Marcus had taught him. Character matters more than credentials. He started hiring people that traditional recruiters overlooked, ex-convicts with technical skills, single mothers seeking career advancement, immigrants with brilliance but no network connections. His division became the most innovative in the entire company because he invested in people's potential rather than their pedigree. Mrs. Patterson, at 73 years old, became the director of a $500 million charitable initiative. She'd never held corporate power before, but she had something more valuable. She understood struggle. She understood dignity. She understood that poverty wasn't a character flaw. It was often just bad luck combined with systemic barriers. Under her direction, the foundation funded affordable housing projects in 12 cities within the first year. But What made it truly different was that she hired formerly homeless individuals as architects and project managers, giving people experience and opportunity alongside shelter. The media tried to turn Marcus into a billionaire superhero, a vigilante CEO, dispensing justice to morally corrupt. But that missed the point entirely. Marcus wasn't interested in being a hero. He was interested in revealing truth. He was interested in demonstrating that wealth without character is empty, that power without compassion is destructive, that invisibility can be a kind of clarity. In his new role, Marcus started something unprecedented. He created a foundation that invested in invisible infrastructure, not the flashy buildings and monuments that get their founders' names engraved on plaques. Instead, he funded scholarships for maintenance workers' children, medical debt forgiveness programs for essential workers, housing initiatives for people living paycheck to paycheck. He funded these projects anonymously at first, understanding that true impact doesn't require recognition. But slowly, the real change became visible. When you eliminate student debt, kids can become engineers and doctors and teachers. When you provide housing security, people have the stability to build careers. When you invest in invisible workers, you're investing in the foundation that holds society together. The wealthy get the credit for the buildings they live in, but the maintenance workers are the ones who keep them standing. One evening, months after the gala, Marcus sat with David in his office. David had requested a meeting, and Marcus had wondered what was coming. David pulled out a document, a new division proposal. "I want to create something," David said. "A program that identifies brilliant people working invisible jobs, maintenance supervisors, security guards, custodians, delivery drivers, and offers them free advanced education, technical training, business acumen, leadership development. We give them tools to become whatever they want to become." Marcus read the proposal twice. His eyes went damp. "I learned from the best," David continued. "You showed me that invisibility doesn't mean worthlessness. It just means nobody's been paying attention. I want to start paying attention." The program launched 6 months later. Its first cohort of 50 participants included people from every background imaginable: a former janitor studying software engineering, a maintenance worker pivoting into architecture, a security guard learning project management. What they all shared was that same characteristic Marcus had noticed in David years ago. They had character, they had hunger, they had potential that the world had overlooked. But Marcus understood something deeper that he kept to himself. This wasn't about rescuing invisible people. It was about recognizing that invisibility is often about perception, not reality. Some of the most powerful, most capable, most morally centered people in the world are invisible simply because society's attention is directed elsewhere. That's not a tragedy that needs fixing with charity. It's an opportunity that needs recognizing. 3 years after the gala, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at his foundation office. It was Jennifer. She wasn't there for money or advice. She was there to thank him. Her business incubator had launched 300 successful companies. More importantly, she'd gotten married to someone who challenged her thinking, who questioned her assumptions, who pushed her toward genuine growth. "I wanted you to know," Jennifer said, "I'm not the person I was. I still care about success, still care about money, but it's not what defines me anymore. You gave me that gift by holding up a mirror and forcing me to look at what I've become." Marcus listened and realized something. The real impact of that gala hadn't been in who he'd punished or who he'd elevated. It had been in the choices people had made afterward. He'd simply created a moment of honesty. What they did with that honesty was entirely up to them. The most beautiful moment came unexpectedly. Mrs. Patterson called him one morning with news. One of the families the foundation had housed had just gotten their daughter accepted to medical school. They were first-generation college, formerly homeless, now thriving. But here's what Mrs. Patterson wanted Marcus to know. The girl had seen herself in the foundation's mission. She'd gone into medicine specifically because she wanted to understand the health disparities that had affected her family. She wanted to be the doctor who saw the invisible people. "She's going to change lives," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice thick with pride. "And she exists because we chose to see her." That's when Marcus truly understood the magnitude of what had been set in motion. This wasn't about one billionaire's revenge against shallow people. This was about creating systems where invisibility doesn't equal worthlessness. This was about building a world where character matters more than credentials, where potential matters more than pedigree, where a maintenance supervisor's daughter has the same opportunity as an executive's son. The revelation of Marcus's identity had changed everything. Richard faced justice. Jennifer found authenticity. Sarah chose honesty. David became a leader of impact. And Mrs. Patterson became living proof that wisdom and capability aren't determined by your previous social standing. But the real story isn't about what happened to them. The real story is what's happening now. In cities across the country, invisible people are becoming visible because someone finally paid attention. Maintenance workers' children are becoming engineers. Security guards are becoming entrepreneurs. The foundation has shifted from reactive charity to proactive transformation, identifying potential, investing in character, and creating pathways for excellence. Before you go, I want to know, what city are you watching the story from? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening to this tale of hidden wealth and revealed character. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to join our community. We have stories about people who were underestimated, overlooked, and invisible until the moment their true character was revealed. New episodes drop weekly, and each one is a reminder that the world is full of hidden strength waiting to be seen. Subscribe now, and don't miss a single story of redemption, revelation, and the power of paying attention to people everyone else has overlooked.